Hi, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. How are you?
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Good, doing good. How about you?
I am doing great. So it's about 10 in the morning where I am. I'm not, where are you?
I'm in Lahore, Pakistan. It's about 8 p.m. in the evening now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
So,
you are ready to call it a night soon.
not too soon, but yeah, it's getting there. I'm actually used to working at night, so it's pretty much a normal day for me.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for opening up some time.
No,
I
no,
happen
always a
to,
pleasure.
well, I happen to be doing some research, and as I think I shared in the original LinkedIn
Yeah.
connection, is, I'm in the process of submitting my book to a publisher about high performance culture, and I always love reaching out to people who are better than me or more experienced than me or might have a different take than I do, and begin to share and get advice or guidance, and maybe I
Yeah.
hopefully can supply some back in my own way.
Excellent.
um, Maybe I'll give you a 30-second story about me. I've done a little research about you, but I'd love to learn a little bit more as well. And so I was with one company. I graduated college in Rhode Island,
Okay.
a place called Roger Williams, and always knew I wanted business, and happened to fall into a company called Enterprise Rent-A-Car, which is a global company that, who would think you'd go to college to just rent cars? Doesn't sound overly glamorous. But what it became is, of course, much more than that. It was my
Right.
business opportunity, and the car was the product. And so, fast forward, well, I start one of four people in an office, not knowing what I was doing. And 26 plus years later, I gained a tremendous amount of experience and rose through being a person of, one of four in an office to being able to lead, a few hundred employees within my region. And I learned a lot of value on what to do, what not to do, a lot of great lessons, a lot of great mentors. I had probably one of my biggest challenges is I eventually took over a territory that, um, unfortunately, the person before me was let go for performance related issues. And I use this playbook that I write about as kind of a roadmap. And when I hung up my enterprise cleats, in 2018, to figure out what was next, one of the things I decided to do was begin a journey of, well, a few things. One was I'd like to share my story. And not really just the story, because I don't think too many people are going to care about Eric Stone, but I think they might care about some practical tips that I utilized with one of the largest privately held companies in North America. And that's how I kind of evolved. I am not an author. I am attempting to be an author. Um, I had a lot of helpful people, and I interviewed a bunch of people for the book
Right, right.
who are, again, probably a little bit more known than I. And so I officially just sent it to a publisher, and we're kind of working on the next iteration of what the book is going to look like, and to eventually, hopefully by summertime or end of summer, I'll have something out that will really be beneficial, hopefully to help people.
Wonderful.
That's a quick thing about me. I'd love to, how did you get into the space you're in?
Well, I actually started as a somebody who wanted to embark upon an engineering career, and that is something that was a very traditional thing to look at how one sort of molded their career path in my part of the world. Either you became a doctor or an engineer. MBAs were not the thing that you wanted to go into. And I initially followed that path because of my own family's inclination towards that. And I did my undergrad actually from Northern Arizona University in the US. And once I did that, I found that although started my career as an engineer in Sri Lanka, but I didn't find that much appealing in terms of the technical aspects. I wanted to do actually a bit more than that. I wanted to actually, um, let's say, impact the organizations I was working with in a much more profound manner than to be just categorized in a functional level as an engineer, although I heavily respect what engineers do. So what happened was that initially, when I entered into this career as an engineer, I started looking at other aspects that could actually bridge my purpose that I wanted to actually embrace. And I found my calling into developing management systems. And I'm sure you're aware of the ISO 9000 series of standards. And I went into consultancy actually and became a trainee consultant. Then I started managing consultants. Then I rose to senior consultant. And once I started doing that, I came across a bunch of organizations, and not only in Pakistan, but also in the region itself. And I started realizing that what a rich way of actually gaining experience and insights into the different environments and unique aspects that each organization presented itself. So everything was a challenge as a consultant, and you had to come up with unique solutions to overcome that. So having gained that experience, I actually then got my MBA, and then I started working a bit more, and I worked with an airlines, and I got more and more involved into how you could relate with people, how you could help organizations in a much more profound manner, tweak the corporate side and the functional side and the human aspects accordingly to maximize the productive aspects within the organization, while also catering to the humanistic elements that evolve with that. And then the digital age came along and everything sort of got sped up. So, and different things, the old management theories started to be questioned, and the new ways of thinking started evolving, and I wanted to be very much part of that. So then that bridge, actually, I walked across that bridge from management consultancy into organizational development. Then I went into talent management and business transformation. So while I was doing that, I got my second master's degree in HR and industrial relations from the University of Sydney. And then that sort of opened up even more aspects for me in terms of eventually landing into a position where thought leadership became much more important as far as my guiding principle in terms of how I could bring out all that knowledge and expertise that I gained over the years and combine it with the imperatives that are being evolved in the digital age, and then share those lessons with others, while also making sure that I'm able to engage with them proactively. So I became, in that time, I actually went to the United Arab Emirates, and I was very active in the Dubai area in terms of regional and international conferences that are being held over there. I lived there for about 9 years, and I've just recently come back last year from there. And because of the COVID-19 things, a lot of things are in a flux right now, and hopefully this thing gets over with as quickly as possible. And while I was doing that, I started gaining recognition, and I came up with different ways of methodologies and innovation approaches that were helping a lot of organizations in that context, in my consultancy aspect, as a speaker, as a presenter, as a moderator. And that sort of evolution took me to a place where I started feeling really comfortable in terms of how I was adding value as a professional. So here I am now talking to you, and I'm sure you have explored my profile and you've seen a bit of my writings also. But I think that's a place where I'm very comfortable now, because I can see that a typical person in a job sometimes does not get a chance to even utilize the whole knowledge package that they have, and that sometimes builds up an internal frustration within them that, hey, I know much more than that, I can do much more than that, but my job description or the environment I'm evolving in does not allow me to apply that much of a bandwidth that I am actually having. So if you have the passion and the dedication to actually spread that knowledge and share that expertise and gain in return the same amount of insight from others who are actually interacting with you at the same time. I think that's such a mutually beneficial relationships that very few professionals get to have. And that's one of the things that motivates me, because I don't want to be, secluded in this corner where only the thing that I do matters in a very restricted environment. I just want to open up. And while that opening up occurs, I want to embrace the knowledge and expertise that is evolving all around me. So it's kind of like, you're thriving in an ecosystem where you are contributing and you're getting, the benefit of being part of that too. So that's a brief introduction about me.
Well, thank you. That's great. Now, on one of the things, especially with some of your background, I'd be very curious about. I want to make sure that, obviously, of course, what I am putting out is going to be extremely valuable and or slightly different. Of course, I mean, there's thousands of out there on this particular topic, and how do you make yourself different?
Right.
Is, and then honing in on that. Well, knowing so my book is about creating a high performance culture. I'd be really curious of what would you want personally, someone with your background, experience, success, what would actually make you pick up a book from somebody? What would you want to, well, I guess really the vague question is, what would make you pick up a book about high performance culture that would get you excited to get either a different take, or what are you looking for?
Eric, to be honest with you, I think you're very correct in terms of saying that there are a lot of books that are targeting performance, especially the changing dynamics in various organizations in this digital age. But if I were to get interested in a book that actually gave me some valuable insights or knowledge, it would be, a combination of some creative application of some frameworks or methodologies or approaches that are in tune with the demands of the digital age, plus some case studies that actually throw insight into how practically this thing is being applied in certain situations. So, for example, if we take the scenario right now, how do you actually evolve a high performance or maintain a high performance organization within the demands of a hybrid workforce, which is, trying to manage the challenges of COVID-19 pandemic. So if remote working is going to become a norm, how is an organization supposed to evolve in a high performance environment where there is no social contact, there's no face-to-face sitting down and having lunch and having those informal chats also, or having that office environment, while you're expecting that everybody sort of puts up their weight and gets along with gaining the objectives of the organization. So how would that evolve in that context? And aligned to that would be, how are the different generations being accommodated in the workforce? So whether it's Gen Z coming up or Gen X, looking at the end part of their career, or Gen Y sort of, trying to take the mantle of Gen X, how are they going to evolve in that context? So, a bit of theory put into practice, and then sort of coming up with some recommendations or solutions that are accommodated enough of the scenarios that occur in various parts of the world also. Because with technology, everything has evolved. I have worked with people who, in Canada, in US, in the Middle East, in Asia. So, unless you have that sort of an exposure, a lot of these books that come out, to be honest with you, Eric, they tend to be very regionalized in their approach. So, for example, if I were to take your example, I would say that you work for a big company, enterprise, rent a car, and you accumulate a lot of good experience. But was that experience diversified? For example, did you go out of North America? Did you had an opportunity to evolve in Europe or Asia or Middle East? Or did you work with those partners or team members who were in those areas? And did you actually gain some insights of working with somebody who's not in North America, and how are they evolving and how are you contributing to their growth and development? So what does high performance mean for someone who's in North America? What does that mean for somebody who's working in Asia or Europe or Australia or Asia? So that
Yeah,
sort of,
great.
yeah, so that sort of brings in the global appeal of the book for me, because unless you're global, quite frankly, a lot of these books have really good things in them, but when it comes down to practically applying those lessons, people like me who are actually thought leaders who have to come up with unique solutions and insights, they find it very difficult in recommending such things, because people would ask me, well, if you were to recommend me a book, what would that be? I would say, well, something that actually evolves and grows within the environment that you're evolving and growing in. So is your ecosystem being catered to? Or is there somebody who has done some really good work, but that work is more applicable in a certain environment? It doesn't apply to anybody else. So, that sort of a thing. I'll give an example of, for example, diversity and inclusion. All right. So if you're looking at diversity and inclusion in the context of Asia, well, here the diversity and inclusion aspect becomes a bit different, because the dynamics of diversity and inclusion are different, because there are more Asians here than Caucasians. So the sort of the script is kind of a flipped in that context. And then you have to accommodate the relationships between the expat workforce and the local workforce. So how do you create that balance? I've seen organizations where they had their regional offices in Asia, but the senior management was dominated by uh, the expat population, and locals never had a chance to go up the ranks. So that created a lot of tension between them, because they didn't find that they were included. Although on the face of it, they were diverse, but inclusion was missing. And that sort of has that undercurrent of dissatisfaction that can bubble up at any time and create difficulties for the organization. And the maximization of talent it seems to lack in that context then, and the organization actually suffers as a consequence. And a lot of these people then start looking for greener pastures outside that organization, and they'll jump at the slightest possibility. As you well know, especially in the US, it's going through what has been termed as the Great Resignation, where people are saying enough is enough. I might be unemployed for some time, but I just cannot take this work environment anymore. So, where's that high performance going? And another thing, Eric, is that the accommodation of opinion coming from the bottom and from the sides, that has to be, incorporated into strategic thinking. I'll give you an example of Boeing. Look at that. I mean, they're one of the companies that were known for having the front end of the Six Sigma ride, and having so much high performance things going. And what happened to them with the 787 debacle? Something did not happen. They did not listen to their internal experts. They did not listen to the engineers who were screaming not to mess with that. They were just looking at the corporate results, and they wanted to focus on the shareholders, and that really messed them up. And in the end, the company suffered, the image suffered, the senior management suffered. And similarly is the case with GE. Look at that, what happened to GE. It was one of the original members of the Dow Jones. It's not even there anymore. And what has happened over the years to that sort of an organization? And there was a time when used to give examples of companies like this in terms of high performance and high, admirable culture and all that. And then you see a lot of these tech firms going through the same cycle too, where lessons are being learned all the time, where, unfortunately, you look at the advent of the Steve Jobs syndrome, what I'll call, in terms of, being ruthless about getting results while not catering to the humanistic element within organizations. So what happens is you're trying to gain results, and then you're simply just not caring about the people who are trying to give you that results. And you think you can replace that with automation, where that does not happen, and it leaves a bad taste for people who are staying behind and who get laid off. And you look at companies like Amazon. It's a behemoth. It's got really good business model, but does it have a good organizational model? That's my question, which I sort of have to figure out, because if you're looking at high performance organization, you have to create a balance between the two. You cannot have a really good business model, but be very poor in terms of an organization. And if you are not looking after your warehouse workers, or there are fires happening, or people cannot even take toilet breaks, and you're controlling everybody like robots, there's something that's seriously lacking in there. And I think this sort of fetish about sticking to corporate results and looking at quarterly outputs of financial measures and looking at shareholders, that has been very detrimental to the going concern aspect of such organizations. And although it does give opportunity to other competitors, but it just does not cater well to how organizations should be managed. I think that's the kind of thing where a high performance organization need to reevaluate whether they are still that, or they have evolved into something that is totally different from there. And a book that sort of or a knowledge bank that sort of caters to that has to be open enough and honest enough to cover those parameters, which are actually seriously lacking in there. Because if you are the so-called high performance organization, then why are your people leaving? Why are there some people who will get all the benefits and all the accolades, while the other majority of the people think that they are being deceived out of or cheated out of something that they deserve? And the attrition rates are high as usual. Why are organizations squeezing in terms of their core workforce and having a peripheral workforce which is bigger and bigger? And they think that the culture only sticks to the core workforce, or organization only means the core workforce, while the peripheral workforce, or the contractor workforce, or the part-time workforce, those rules of having a well-adjusted environment does not apply to them. So, I think when you look at these sort of things, I would be looking at a book or a knowledge bank that caters to that sort of a thinking. It has a broader aspect, a global appeal, and an all-encompassing solution-oriented approach for that.
Yeah, well, you share some really good information that would, so let me fill you in a little bit about what you said. And so with the book, and so the wheelhouse of everything you said would be high performance culture and all these from, and the way I looked at it. So we would have people who would clean our cars, the service agents, and I had to know their name just like I knew the regional manager's name, and I had to understand their kids. And and so the good thing is, and I so agree, it was, matter of fact, at one point, the person I used to report to was definitely a little narcissistic, and certainly learned what not to do through that approach. But I always felt, how much better would he have been? He was really talented if he just treated you with a little bit more humanity, and it wasn't so about the individual. So the wheelhouse, and then practicality you brought up too. So I feel really good about my practicality. So I did work for a large global powerhouse of a privately held, one of the largest, and that part resonates well. Good practical ways of how to do it. I was really big on the training and development
Yeah.
of behaviors that help people become successful. And the book really gives you a good roadmap. So I feel good there. You made a really eye-opening thing that I've got to be mindful of understanding who my audience is. Two of my very close counterparts, one was my regional manager who then went to go run Spain. He ran the country, Spain.
Mm.
My other really good friend who was more of, we would bounce ideas off each other when he was an executive in the States, it runs Germany. So the interesting thing, and maybe I should definitely put even a little bit more of a touch of it, is some of the practices are absolutely universal. So when I would reach out to check in on my buddy from Spain, he would say, Eric, honestly, I just do what we talked about. Like I hit a couple of the staples that have become universal, knowing no, it is not the same. He didn't speak Spanish. He had to try to learn it. My buddy in Germany knows a touch of German, but he's not super fluid,
Right.
but they're enough to get by. And
Right.
each of them would share, you know, what I did is I did bring this initiative over and here's how I did it. And I probably need to make sure if I truly, and I got to make sure I'm staying in my lane, sharing maybe a little bit more of this global, I mean, I talk about a global company, but to your point, my experience was in North America. My counterparts' experiences are global. They, some of them were under me who brought some of the practices. And so let me ask you a question. What do you see as the universal approach? There's never a one size fits all.
Right.
And I loved your analogy of the expats in a particular country and where it went wrong.
Yeah.
You know, and in your opinion, what are there some universal things that are tried and true about high performance culture?
I think definitely I agree with you that there are things that are common and they should be taken as a baggage with people who are climbing the ladders. I think it mostly reflects upon the shared values that a corporate company, projects itself in terms of, for example, innovation, for example, creativity, for example, time management, dealing with people respectfully, with kindness, having empathy in terms of understanding where everybody is coming from. And I think these are the kind of things that high performance organizations need to embrace and need to have within the fabric of their own organizational hierarchy. And teamwork is another one. If you have these kind of things evolving within high performance organizations, I think it makes the job of people who might be from different backgrounds much easier in terms of gelling with each other and trying to work towards the common goal of what organization is striving to do, while at the same time also making sure that their own personal ambitions and individual goals are also being fulfilled in that context. So let's take time management. Somebody from the US could come to somebody for example, Qatar, and show how they actually manage time properly in terms of getting things done, and making sure how they properly prioritize things so they don't get left out in terms of what the critical tasks are and what the non-critical tasks are, because sometimes a lot of the people focus on non-critical tasks and they forget that the critical task is something different. And to be honest, sometimes this is also because of the way people respond to their supervisors and the higher management, because in the US or in Netherlands or in UK or in Europe or in Canada, the level of conversation between a person who's in a junior position to a person who's in a senior position is although is respectful, but it's more open. So you can openly engage with that person, and the person who's at the other end at a higher position is more willing to embrace in most situations. And I'm just talking about high performance organization or progressive organizations, to listen to what's coming up from the bottom or from his or her team members. Whereas sometimes in Asia or cultures where the person who's at a higher level is given so much respect that sometimes they might be doing something wrong and their own team members wouldn't hesitate to point that out to them, because they would think is that as a sign of disrespect or trying to sort of put that person down in terms of their own ability to do the thing. And on the other side of the thing, that person in the higher position could take that as as sort of an insult, that, hey, I'm in a higher position, so I'm supposed to guide you, not take guidance from you. And that's the thing that in the digital age has evolved, because everybody has knowledge, everybody has insights. Unless you open yourself to all quarters, you are actually getting isolated. And that's the reason I mentioned about multi-generational workforces earlier, that would the baby boomers listen to Gen X, and would Gen X listen to Gen Y, or Gen Y listen to Gen Z? Or are we so siloed up in our own little professional cocoons that we will isolate ourselves and say, well, he or she doesn't know what they're talking about. I'm the person who's been here for such a long time, so I know how to do it. And especially when technology is involved, and especially when how to communicate with all kinds of the workforce generations we have working in organizations are involved. So what does high performance mean anyway? And I have written about it also in terms of getting away from this thing called hypos, the high potential thing that we talk about. I think that is a very detrimental thing, because I see hypos as an evolved form of the normal distribution curve that was so dreaded, and it was actually evolved by General Electric, in terms of weeding off the bottom 10% of the workforce while you're sort of focusing on the others. But in this situation where COVID is raging, everybody's important. So how can you sort of start looking at, well, those are the unwanted people? Well, everybody's wanted, everybody's skilled, everybody's got some talent, you have them, So unless you work with them, you enable them, you are actually just letting go of your own knowledge bank in that context. So I came up with the term called HICO, which is high commitment. And I said that you should have a broader bandwidth of what a person can contribute to an organization with high commitment, because right now it's commitment that's required. If you're looking at high potential, those people are, sort of a periodic stayers in organizations. If they get a good offer, they'll fly away. But organizations need people who can stick around, who can evolve with the organization, who actually care about the organization enough that they can, make sure that the organization sticks around and does not become irrelevant or uncompetitive in this environment. And those are the kind of challenges that organizations are facing right now.
Great. I love the HICO. And the reason I don't know if you noticed I was smiling so much when you were going over it is two keys. One, and it's interesting, I used to have some polite disagreements with the people above me at times, who would tell me, Eric, matter of fact, one of my chapters is about hiring for culture, and I call it a cultural match versus fit. It's a little bit different. Mm-hmm. And I used to drive me crazy that he would tell me, Eric, you should only hire 10s, meaning 1 out of 10, a 10. And I go, that would be great if I could hire 10s. I would hire nobody, including myself. I was not a 10, And I focused on 3 keys that kind of go into what you're saying. I called it attitude, effort, and coachability. That was one bucket of which it's hard to teach that. Hard to teach someone to care. And I think where we became, well, where we outperformed all regions in the country, especially at the retention level, on a consistent decade basis, not a year, not a month, not a quarter,
Right.
was a lot of that philosophy. And the other thing I was smiling with the HICO is your high commitment, right? That's how you phrased it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is we generated what we called commitments, and we kept it very simple, which is another huge philosophy of many, but certainly mine, of addition by subtraction. Simple is the approach.
Right.
And I called them the commitment, and I wanted people, that's what I looked for. I knew I could coach and develop and train a lot of things. I could teach people to sell. I do know that there are certain requirements and things that help, but I love that HICO. And
I'll send you that article. I'll send you that article.
Please do. And
Yeah.
because if I end up, as you know better than I, as I continue to learn more and more from people like yourself, different thinking, different approach, different wording that packages so perfectly to what, frankly, I am talking about. Because I do think there's a balance with, I love the high commitment. I think you got to be careful with high potential. I think it's okay to say that there are people you see that have a really ceiling. It's also one of my hiring chapters, is that how do you find the Tom Brady's of the world? I mean, how do you do?
Yeah.
So clearly there's something that's there. So I really like that HICO. That's a really cool term.
Yeah, I'll send you an article, and I've written that with that context in terms of broadening the bandwidth of a person's attachment with the organization, because I was looking at the organizational citizenship behavior, and I wanted to make sure that they're just not seen as somebody who's just striving for either their own career progress or the organization goals, but there's a bigger bandwidth that they need to engage in. So I totally agree that there are overlaps with the hypo thing, and I've actually pointed that out in my article too. So once you go through that article, you see how I've framed it, and that's why I wanted to see. And in this scenario of COVID-19, I think the HICO thing is just right then and there the most critical part. Although I wrote it before the pandemic. But it just gets reinforced every time I see how these organizations getting, challenged up with unforeseen circumstances. Just look at how all the risk management plans went out the door once COVID hit. I mean, how many organizations call themselves secure and high performing and, as industry leaders before COVID hit? And it just sort of tore away the clothes from everybody. It's almost like you're walking naked in a corporate. Yeah, you're exposed. I mean, how good are you? Because nobody actually tested you at that level. Once you got tested, there are very few organizations that are actually standing up, and they had to actually start to look for new kinds of clothing so they could wear them and properly dress up for this kind of challenge. And that's the thing that organizations had to recalibrate in terms of how they can adjust to this. And now they think they're leaner and wiser and probably more prudent, but let's see, when the next thing heads up or hunts down the corporate landscape, and who survives that. So, but
I'd be interested in your thoughts. So I think there's two pieces I believe within the book that are fairly unique. One is the ability to get all, again, like you were saying before, all levels to have an understanding in my methodology of how I approach taking these commitments, bottling these special initiatives, but getting that initiative in several different timelines of your career, you'd be exposed to it. And I think that is what helped us get this traction, momentum. And I think that was one of our secret sauces. The other is going to be, and I haven't 100% committed to it, but I developed a measurement of culture. So in all my years, whether it's been on nonprofit boards, consulting, my career with enterprise, there were these things that I feel made up. I would call it execution at a highest of level where people feel good about it. And there's these three quantitative components or pillars, or however you'd want to say it, and then three qualitative. And what I did is, most people, so it seems, when I would ask you and I'd say, hey, how do you measure culture? What would your first response be to that question?
God, that's got to be hard to encompass in that. My response to that in terms of a measurement would be probably looking at some parameters in which I can encapsulate culture. It could be, the values which are actually defining the organization itself, how well they're embraced within the organization, how well people are adapting to the changing environment, how are they receptive to their team members and superiors, how well are they in terms of the mental health or the other well-being aspects that they're able to function. If you how well are they able to do their jobs in a different environment, whether it's at the in the corporate environment or at home if it's in a hybrid environment. And how well are they socially engaged with the organization? How well are they listened to at the decision maker level? How well are their own personal growth and development needs catered to within that context? How attached they feel to the organization itself, despite being lured by competitors with higher pay packages, whether pay is a determinant for them strong enough to leave the organization, or actually there is a binding element with the organization that keeps them there. So I think for me, it's not an easy question to answer, but I think these are different parameters on which I could come up with some framework or with some type of measurement which can do that. But I have to understand, I'm very aware of one thing, Eric, is that people like to keep things a lot to themselves, especially in a corporate environment, because they fear that if they let out everything that they had within themselves, they might put their careers in jeopardy. And they are desperate to find a confidant that they can actually actively engage in. But I see a lot of frustration in people who seem to have a lot of things just bottled up inside while they wear their professional smiles at the workplace. And that sort of a thing hinders a lot of these measurements too, because some of these things may never be measured because they're just kept inside. I mean, how do you measure the cultural, the cultural atmosphere within a subsidiary in Asia with the head office in North America? Because the dynamics of expats working with the local population, and maybe there's some friction happening, maybe there's some synergies happening, but that's totally different to a head office in the US where work environment is different, people are engaging at a different level. So if a multinational wants to gauge the culture aspect, would it have to segregate and bifurcate that sort of a thing in terms of what works at head office? Hey, this is a good culture for a head office. Hey, this is a good culture for a subsidiary. What works as a subsidiary in Africa? What works for a subsidiary in Asia? What works for a subsidiary in Asia, Europe, even Western Europe, Eastern Europe? And what works for a head office in North America or Canada? So once you look at that sort of an aspect, I think you have to be always aware that there's a error margin which always needs to be incorporated in that context, and you always have to give some sort of a note down under that. Hey, this is sort of a measuring the things that we think are common, and they can travel as commonalities to other places. It doesn't matter where you are, but there are also other aspects which will have to be categorized as individual aspects that need to be catered over there, because subsidiaries I've seen in multinationals, corporate environment, totally different culture. Subsidiaries have a totally different culture, although they might be bound by some shared values and corporate principles. But once it comes down to working on a day-to-day level, that cultural aspect is totally presenting a different picture. And that's why a lot of these organizations face the difficulty when they're trying to mobilize workers or employees or management people from one location to another location, especially in a different environment. If they are not sensitized to that, and the people over there are not sensitized to the incoming people, there's a time where a lot of fluidity is present in terms of who's going to adjust with whom and at what pace and at what level. And that's the kind of thing. And I'll give you an example. For example, let's consider that somebody from Asia goes to San Francisco to work at a software firm as head office, right? So he's comfortable in his language or her language, and he's comfortable with eating home food and having a sort of the comfort level of a home nearby and all that. Now he or she goes to the head office because he's a good or she's a good performer, and he's sitting in a country where he does not know anything or how to adjust to people. So he's always or she's always trying to make adjustments. But are the other people who are actually at the head office also making adjustments? Or is this just the sole responsibility of the person who's come to that place from the other place to be assimilated within that culture? So that's the kind of dynamic that also happens to take hold in such organization where, I like to give the example of, if you want to really see culture taking root, don't look in formal meetings, or don't look at official functions. Just go and look at the lunch tables. Just go and look at the office gyms. Who's hanging out with whom? Who's chatting with each other? Who's talking to whom? Is there grouping happening within these organizations? Is there somebody who's mingling with everybody? Or is there, you can clearly identify this is that group and this is that group, and you have the office grapevine and all that stuff happening. So once you talk in culture, you have to see whether that sort of a thing is taking hold at the very root level, or it's just something that is a corporate norm that needs to be embraced, but there's certain limits where it just does not filter into, and people just want to take it as it is, in terms of just some job aspect that they have to do, not actually something that they need to embody totally as part of their professional portfolio.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So when I was mentioning the measurement, one thing that my approach is, and I should probably state it, it is a self-assessed approach with your organization. So to your point, I wouldn't have enough data to say this is the universal. That'd be pretty arrogant of me to say this is everywhere. Right. But where it will, and there are organizations that help you at least compare, like a Gallup survey. I mean, you can see how you compare within an industry. Right. I don't know if Gallup breaks it down. I'm assuming they break it down by part of the country potentially. That I don't know. Right. But mine is a big self-assessed approach where, step one with everything is how are you doing versus what you used to be doing, right. And that dashboard is what my approach is.
Yeah, I think, it's good to have that sort of expanded outlook on things, because I'll send you 2-3 articles that actually expand on that sort of thing. I'll just give you an example on, something that I actually got very serious into after I saw what happened to Boeing and other organizations who actually faltered from being the industry titans and learned some hard lessons. And that was the evolution of a position called the Chief Experience Officer. Now, normally when you talk about experience officers, you're talking about customer satisfaction or, employee customer feedback. But I actually wrote about it and I said, you need to have, as a high performance organization, a position called a Chief Experience Officer that filters all aspects of an organization's interaction with its key stakeholders. Now, HR is dealing with people within its organization. So how are they experiencing while they're going through their life cycle of being an employee within an organization? That has to be taken out of HR, put into an independent function. Customer satisfaction, you're already doing it fine. Take it independently. Let's see, and sort of put in a position which is actually looking at all these aspects, whether it's customer, employee, subcontractor, the regulator, the shareholders. You need to have a Chief Experience Officer position, which is actually just focused on that sort of a thing, because in the digital age, the key thing that matters is experiences. And if you're not providing the right kind of experience for people, culture does not matter. What is culture in itself? It is a series of experiences. And if you're not actually trying to, come up with a good experience package for your employees, you are failing as a progressive organization. And that's why I came up with that position. I'll send you that article too. And, once you read through it, you'll understand what kind of context I'm taking, because my problem in organizations is, whether it's progressive or regressive, is that everybody's so functionally focused that they try to embrace whatever experience somebody's having within that function within itself. So the top management is always getting one-sided look at all these things, whether it's customer focused, well, the salespeople have it, or the customer focused department or whatever function you allocated to has that sort of a report, and they'll just present it in whatever form of a dashboard or anything that appeals to the top management. But it's just providing one part of the picture. It's not providing what's driving that. So if you have a centralized position where you see, hey, we got too many complaints coming up with customers, what's driving that? So if you don't have an employee experience picture coming up at the same time, and HR is just not sort of just managing the thing, and rather actually reporting it to somebody who can aggregate these things together in the form of the causes and the effects sort of a thing, the whole picture does not come to the top management for correct decision making. So they're always reacting to somebody's functional projection of something without actually looking at the whole organization. And that's my key sort of a concern with these organizations, is that look at, and I'll give you an example of Boeing again. Look at Boeing. They had excellent customer satisfaction. The plane had no problem, in terms of fulfilling the functional needs. The only thing is they kept the information hidden in terms of some critical aspects, which the engineering people were screaming about, right? Where did that go? Why did that have to not reach the management or be ignored? Because the experience function was not catering to the holistic way of looking at all the key stakeholders. It was only catering to the customer satisfaction. Every organization, whoever claims to be progressive, has customer satisfaction, right? Think about your own organization in terms of enterprise, right? If you are in the sales and you're just projecting, really good sales numbers, and you say customers are happy, but you're not projecting why are they happy? There's an outside aspect to it, as in terms of, well, the customers get good service, but there's an internal aspect to it. How the internal functions are coming together to provide that higher quality of service. So you have some lessons learned that can be preserved in terms of good practices. And if there are any lapses, they could also be preserved in terms of lessons learned and, sort of try to improve them. And that's the kind of thing.
Yeah, you're actually, so part of my measurement is double weighted with customer experience and employee experience. So I love what you're saying. We have a lot in common. And the other thing, it's actually part of my roadmap. And so part of my listen, observe, and learn approach was not just, hey, talk to your employees,
Right.
Don't just talk to your clients. You got to talk to your customers, your vendors.
Right.
And in my book, I provide kind of an approach to do it. So I love everything you're saying about that. I think you're dead on, and it's a big part of my formula, and it's a big part of my roadmap.
Yeah, I think there's no two ways about it. I mean, you got to pull together. You talked about how you were dealing with people at the lower hierarchy of the organization, and I like that idea because you see a lot of the organizations sometimes miss this thing, that who is the first person to convey a positive or a negative image about a company. I mean, who is that person? Is that the security guard? Is that the receptionist? Sometimes even before you meet the higher up, a customer or a client might have their own mind made up about what kind of organization are you, just by simply engaging with the people who are between the chain of command, where you get to meet the final person you're supposed to meet. So if you're not treated right, if you are seeing lapses in that sort of a situation before you get to meet the person you wanted to meet in an organization, you already got some answers to your questions about that organization, and you become unconsciously biased about that. And once you meet that person, you're trying to see whether you're confirming your bias in that context, or you're trying to look for clues in terms of negating that impression that you got from the people who are below that person in the organizational hierarchy. So I think it's very critical that everybody is pulling in the same direction. If they're not pulling in the same direction, you have a problem already in terms of that. Now, my concern is that when you go into an online situation, that situation becomes even more critical, because you see, once you're meeting face to face with a person, you have the let's say the benefit or the luxury of correcting yourself if you went wrong. But once you're online, you have a software that's projecting something, and then you have never met the person, or you're never going to meet the person who actually is providing you with some product or service. And at the same time, the organization is trying to come up with a good message for you or provide you good quality service, and you're trying to see if your expectations are being fulfilled. So how do you bridge that barrier in which there is minimal humanistic contact? Now, as humans, we need contact. We need assurances, we need smiles, we need embraces. We need to come together and get reassured that, hey, I'm going to get what I want, right? And I think hopefully we're not running out of time, but I'll give an example. I ordered something from Amazon, right? And this is actually true. So, and I wanted to buy a lead for my computer, a computer lead. Now that computer lead has two parts, as you know. One is the power cord, and the other is the one that actually attaches with the computer. And you have to sort of fix them together so it connects with the computer, because my got damaged. So I ordered it from Amazon. I had one part working fine, which was the power cord, but the other part was not working. So I ordered two of them. So I had, sort of a spare for myself. Now, what happened was that once it got to the warehouse level where somebody was supposed to package that thing, that person actually put uh, the exact opposite of what I was asking. He, instead of putting the same two things, he put one thing, one power cord and the other supplemental cord with that, using their own judgment that, hey, I might be wrong, you know, and they took the judgment upon themselves and they sent me the wrong thing. So I ended up with something that I really didn't want. Now, I called the Amazon service and I said, hey, I have this problem. It's not the thing I wanted. And they said, oh, okay, that's fine. We'll compensate you and you can just keep it because it's too expensive to send it back and, have it picked up. And I'm in my place thinking, hey, you just did not fulfill my conditions. The warehouse workers did not understand that I actually did not want what they sent me. I wanted what I actually asked for. And you are trying to solve my um, complaint or problem by just, wish-washing it with a temporary solution, but you haven't solved my problem. Now, what am I going to do with the extra thing that I have in my house? Although you've, given me the money for it. And these are the kind of things that sort of are built up over time. How many experiences do you have? I'll give you another example. The reason I'm telling you about the tech aspect is because it's the difficulty of not even meeting the person on the other side and then having to actually adjust to that. And you're thinking, hey, what kind of culture is this happening? Now, remember that warehouse workers are normally on the peripheral workforce. They're not part of the core workforce in these tech companies. They're part-time workers. So they actually, pardon my French, they don't give a shit, in terms of what happens to the company's image. They're just trying to make as many packages as possible in a limited time so they can earn more money and then be off their timing. So what happens is that if I wanted to give my wife a gift on her anniversary, right? So, and this is another true story. So I ordered something for her and I was in Dubai at that time and she was coming to Pakistan. So I said, hey, before she leaves, she wanted to see her parents. So I'll give her the anniversary gift. Now, what happened was that they gave me the correct timing. It'll come in 2 days and all that stuff. So I said, okay, I'll time it accordingly. So I ordered a couple of perfumes and I said, hey, I'm waiting, so I'll give her a nice surprise before she goes. The perfumes didn't arrive. They came a week after. My wife had already left, right? Now here's the thing I want to convey to you as a customer, right? So I really got disappointed with that, and I wrote a letter actually to Jeff Bezos, and this is a true story. I wrote a letter to Jeff Bezos. I said, hey, there's some things that you can satisfy a customer with, and then there's some things that you just cannot overcome. And one of these things is the human emotion or the expectations that you built up, and then you didn't deliver on that. So again, this happened is that I got an apology letter, and I was surprised that Jeff Bezos' team, the executive team, and Jeff actually read my letter because it got elevated to him, and they said, "Oh, we'll try to work the system and make it better." Well, so fine, but it doesn't bring that disappointment down to any level in terms of, hey, I wanted to give my wife something before she left for to see her parents. Now, these are the kind of things that built up over time for organizations. So when you're saying high performance organization, you have to be mindful of the kind of expectations that are built up around a high performance organization, whether it's inside from an employee's perspective. Hey, what does the employee organization do for me while I'm doing this for them? And from a customer perspective, hey, I think you're a great company, but why are you a great company? I have my own expectations. Don't disappoint me on my expectation. Similarly, from part-time workers or subcontractors, hey, I work for you as a team and to make you a success. So what are you doing to make me a success? from a regulator perspective, hey, I want you to follow these rules and regulations, be a good corporate citizen. What are you doing to give me the assurances that you are doing the same? So when I look at high performance organizations, I'm looking at the whole ecosystem in which an organization is interacting with its own stakeholders, plus the industry competitors, plus the whole community in which it operates, that sort of a scenario in a holistic manner. And what does high performance mean? Does high performance just mean getting quarterly business results that satisfy the shareholders, while you have pissed off employees and disappointed subcontractors and customers who are actually just bound to you because you're practically a monopoly, and as soon as a good alternative comes up, they'll switch, that sort of a thing. So what does high performance mean itself?
Yeah,
So
no, it's great because, and that's the point of my measurement, is to say you can't just have quantitative and you can't just have qualitative, and you've got to have a parallel, because you can have an engaged workforce who loses $80 million. It doesn't do anyone any good. That's not a good thing.
yeah.
And there has to be a component, which is why my double weighted is customer and employee.
Yeah.
There's got to be a profit standpoint, and then there's, in the middle of that sandwich, there's got to be all the stuff really and I think what most people say is, when I ask how do you measure, they say maybe engagement. And I just think there's so much more about the values, about the ethics, about the DEI, this inclusivity, the exact point you're mentioning, that when the person from Asia comes to California, it is 100%, well, not, it is a very much that where they're going, they better create an inclusive environment for someone who's coming over. That is an expectation that should be there, and something that should be part of the values of, for enterprise, it was our doors are open. And that is a wide open thing. That doesn't just mean for customers, for employees, for vendors, for, it doesn't just mean someone can walk in your door. It's that mindset. So I couldn't agree more.
And one thing, Eric, pardon me for interrupting, but one thing, another important thing that I've seen is that organizations tend not to work too much on ex-employees. And I think it's really important that they should work on ex-employees also. And that's why I mentioned, if you read my the tool that I've developed, I've mentioned the thing about exit interviews. I mean, organizations are so afraid to do exit interviews, like they're going to open up gates of hell for them. But the thing is, a lot of your good people for future hires, or the word of mouth thing in terms of marketing, or actually having a good corporate standing, comes from ex-employees. How many organizations actually act on working with ex-employees in terms of projecting the employer brand? So once you say you're a high performance organization, does that only mean while somebody's attached with you as an employee? Or whether you sort of give them that olive branch that sort of they can carry out to the wider expanse of the corporate wilderness, and sort of spread the good word about you and get more qualified talent to come to you and say good things about you. I mean, if you're not doing that, you're actually missing on a big part of that sort of a thing, because your ex-employees could be your best friends or your worst enemies, and you won't even know it. And that's one of another thing that actually people, even progressive organizations, don't realize. I mean, how many people have, how many organizations have alumni clubs? Let's put it this way,
So there's two things I love what you said. I actually, probably in the last 2 weeks, I have one tomorrow, and I have one, was it yesterday, where I purposely reached out to 2 employees who I actually had to fire. And my relationship is strong enough where I want them to know I'm always there for them. Because they truly did help me and the region go to where we became, to be a really high performing, well-balanced, high performance culture of where everybody felt, well, not everybody, we weren't perfect, but The other thing that I think you'll love is, it's in my book, is while exits are huge to gather and track why, what are the 3 reasons why most people are leaving us, I had my HR manager do what we called the stay interview. And I would do so I would have a performance development meeting with my HR manager. And our role was, it's so funny, it's exactly what you're talking about. How is the experience going? Ryan Stone, it was, what do we need to do better? What are we missing? And of course, you have to have the trust that's built up over the years. And I'll share you another, it's part of my afterword, is I believe so much in the company. And again, it was not perfect. I had many days I did not get promoted. I had many crummy days. My son has carried the tradition of Enterprise. He is now a management assistant within Enterprise. And he was exposed at the age of 4, going trick-or-treating to my administrative building in his tiger costume. Right? He was exposed in the summer picnic where we would invite family or significant others or partners to play basketball or volleyball or just talk. He was we would invite award winners to my house every other month. And I talk about an experience. I wanted them to understand how important they were. And my son would watch me interacting because it was in my house, he's here. And then my son did a capstone project in high school, and guess who the company was? And long story short, he was born into a culture of Enterprise. And to him now making that attempt to say, is this for me or not? And I said, one piece of advice, I go, Ryan, you go as far, like what you do, but just make sure they treat you well. And if you treat them well and they treat you well, you keep going, because it's not all rainbows and lollipops. And the moment that stops, then you can maybe make a decision that's said. But it was just my afterword of the book to talk about how serious I took it, and what happens at work and home is really, really important to this performance culture. How is that experience if they come home and are miserable, and they tell them, whoever, they're going to say, quit. I don't want you unhappy.
Yeah. I think I totally agree with that, Eric. And I think that's very important to have that sort of inculcation in terms of, trying to increase engagement, but also have that generational attachment within the employee and the wider family with the organization. One thing that also actually has significantly come up for me in terms of how companies are dealing with automation, in terms of artificial intelligence coming up and taking a lot of the workplace positions, and how companies are dealing with it within their own corporate culture in terms of sensitizing the employees about that, and how the artificial intelligence becoming an employee in itself rather than just a machine that you punch some numbers and then get some things done. So for me, another aspect that part of the digital age is that you should not sneak up automation on people who are already apprehensive about how automation is going to take their jobs or make them redundant and all that. So there has to be a process of actually looking at how you can manage your workforce in a situation where you are thinking about automation, maybe from a cost perspective, or maybe from an efficiency perspective. But then at the same time, you are empathetic and kind and forthright about making sure that the workforce is apprised and engaged at the right time, and they're mentally prepared for any transition that needs to take place, or upskilling that needs to take place, or reskilling that needs to take place, because the very last resort should be to lay off people. That's the last thing, because you've already invested so much on people that you inducted. So why would you, sort of go to that extreme measure unless there was no other logical choice? And a lot of organizations that I see are actually trying to use COVID as an excuse of, inducting automated solutions while taking care of the sort of, let's say, the nuisance issues related with people, and saying that, hey, the fewer people we have, the fewer people issues we'll have to face or manage. So machines are good. They don't speak or talk back or sort of put us in an awkward position. So let's use this sort of a thing as something to cover up our own inefficiencies or um, leadership difficulties, or actually challenges or missteps, by saying that, hey, we're forced to do that because this is the only way we can stay afloat. And I think that's another challenge for these high performance organizations, or as somebody who's trying to be high performant, is to create the right balance between the humanistic workforce and the automotive workforce. Because as we move along, efficiency is probably going to beat the humans in terms of how machines are going to do some things. But it's the effectiveness part, the multidimensional thinking part, the creativity part, the teamwork part, the networking part, the bonding part. That's the thing that's going to keep humans relevant for the foreseeable future. So if the organizational leadership is not thinking in those terms, and they're just looking at employees as depreciable assets, then we have a big problem for even high performance organizations also, because the pressure from the shareholders or people who are linked with the profitability of the company are going to say, hey, we got this machine now, it can do 10 people's work. Why do we need these 10 people? Well, how are you going to manage those 10 people? Because those 10 people, if you fire them or let them go in a bad way, they're going to become your worst enemies. And everybody's nowadays on social media, whether it's Glassdoor or some other channel, and trying to badmouth you. Last thing you need is some dirt, put up on your reputation in the corporate environment, because that hampers your ability to induct new people, fresh blood, who might be more skilled in terms of what you actually need now. So whether you're moving generations in the employee life cycle to the next journey, or trying to induct technology, the right technology, and in the right way, in the right proper manner, that are still some questions that need to be answered. I've seen a lot of people, organizations where too much technology is there, it doesn't get utilized to its fullest level, and then some new person comes along at the leadership level and they bring their own technology solution. So sometimes organizations are struggling with 2, 3 technologies, and these technologies even are not talking to themselves, to each other. So you have confused workforce who's trying to say, well, which technology should I use? And the time and effort to actually make some technological solution work becomes more cumbersome than just 2 people trying to figure out a solution on their own. And that's one thing that I also emphasize about innovation. Innovation does not need machines. Innovation is just a creative application of thought in a way which hasn't been done before. So it does not require that you bring technology as an innovative solution. That's technological innovation. How about human innovation? Are your people solution oriented or not? Do you give freedom to your people to become innovative? If you don't let your people be creative or give them the empowerment to come up with solutions, you are not progressing as an organization, even though you might on the outside look like a very high performer organization. Think about your organization, previous organization, enterprise. If you did not, if you do not delegate a person on ground who's dealing with clients some sort of authority to come up with some creative solutions, they might not be engaged or empowered to do some things that actually add to the brand value of your own organization. For example, if somebody is stuck, a college kid is stuck in a certain town and they need to get to their home, but it snows, there are snowy conditions. Would you be willing to have an employee arrange an accommodation for them, so that they can take the car next day and sort of still have that opportunity to meet with their family, and that employee actually makes sure that they get home, that sort of a thing. How is that engaged? Because I'll give you an example, a recent example. An Uber driver, you might have heard about it, an Uber driver in the US recently did that. Now, Uber is a company, right? So it has independent drivers working for it. But this guy picked up a girl from a train station, and she wanted to go to her parents' home. Now, you know how bad conditions are in terms of weather. So it snowed, it actually snowed, right? And the highway was closed. Now, the Uber driver could not take her to her parents' home. So what he did was that he took that girl back to the train station so she could get, and the trains were not actually going because they were also blocked. So the girl, he asked the girl, he said, well, I can leave you at the train station where you might have to wait longer for the train to come along, and you're going to miss your, and it was the Thanksgiving time and Thanksgiving and all that, or I can take you to a hotel. I will pay the money for the hotel. You can stay there for the night. I'll talk to your parents, and tomorrow I'll take you to your parents' home. So what that Uber driver did, so the Uber driver actually, and that girl was a student, so she didn't have that much money to actually go to a hotel room. So he arranged totally on his own a hotel room for that girl. She stayed the night over there, and he stayed at his place. Came in the morning, took the girl and dropped her at her parents' house, no extra charge. Uber compensated that driver for the money, extra charges that he incurred, because it projected a positive image for Uber, and it sort of showed up how far the driver was willing to go outside his normal job of actually helping a client. Now, how many people or how many organizations are willing to have that sort of empowerment or trust or confidence in companies, the employees, in terms of taking that path? People are sometimes people are even afraid to break the office stationery because they might be charged for it. And so, that sort of that I just gave you this example because it was a recent event. I just remembered it, but that's the kind of thing that you don't even see. I mean, you being a senior leader might never have seen what an enterprise employee might be doing in a car lot or at the reception desk or outside, but the impact of that would be in terms of higher prestige for your company or a big blowback for your company. And in case of Uber, that became a really good thing, and they wanted to publish it and project it, and the driver got the benefit of being appreciated for it. So these are the kind of things that sometimes the thing called culture doesn't grasp quite fully, because this is something driven from inside. Culture can only facilitate, empower the engagement, but it does not tell you to engage at that level. It will not tell you. It is a personal choice. I want to do it, I'll do it because I'm so attached with the company, because I feel that I need to go an extra mile because it makes me feel good, and my company will stand with me, and I am able to actually make a real difference in somebody's life. And in return, they'll probably end up giving us more business.
Yeah.
So
it's a great story of
yeah,
talking about a memorable moment.
Yeah. I mean, look at that. The girl reaches home, talks to her parents, talks to her extended family, and says, "Hey, this Uber driver, got this thing done for me, and I didn't even know him, and all that." And he just, that's the kind of kindness and goodness that comes from engagement that is linked with the organizational citizenship behavior. And if you don't have that sort of a citizenship built up, and your relationship with your employees is strictly transactional, then it becomes very hard for high performance organizations to become high performance organizations. They might be high performance in words, but they might not be in deeds. And that's the thing that I emphasize in terms of having that holistic view of how are you high performing in terms of all your stakeholders. Because
you know, we
because that's the overwhelming issue with me is that whenever organizations say we are high performing organization, they look at the financial angle with respect to customers and the quarterly results and the satisfied shareholders. That's their high performance, and that's just missing such a big picture. You know?
Yeah, it's exactly why I felt it was important with this formula, because it talks so much more about, you know, your overall either marketing growth or operating growth, whatever it is. And I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you, Eric.
By the way, you shouldn't be number 19 on that list. You'd be number 1 with all your information. That's a letter for you.
Well, actually, I started it's actively engaging with that because I was committed with some other stuff. I was actually number 1 in a couple of years ago. But there's so many other things happening right now. So
it certainly makes sense. I think what makes me smile about even our conversation is I think a lot of the stuff we talk about from a practical approach is what I write about. Now, my experience, I use, you know, a variety of interviews and a lot of me. I was an operator. I was in the middle. I am not philosophically talking about it. I know what it's like to get punched in the nose by, I know what it's like to lose a really good employee. I know what it's like to lose a really good account. I know what it's like to balance all of this stuff and take all my lessons learned. And, but you know what, first of all, I'd love to keep our conversations, you know, going on. I'd love to read, I'm curious about some of the articles you're going to send.
Yeah, I will send it to you. Yeah.
And if there's anyone else, first of all, if I could ever, if there's anything on my side that you'd ever want to have a conversation or what's your point of view on, please, I really enjoyed this conversation.
Excellent.
So I'd like to see if any way I could offer some value. And is there anyone else you'd say, Eric, you know what, you got to reach, listen, the person, who do you go to say, you know, whether it's your mentor, who's the one that you'd say, Eric, you know what, hey, you might also want to have a conversation with, you know, someone who's, you know, done it longer than I have, or someone you highly respect. And based on this conversation, I would trust that that's someone I'd probably really enjoy.
I've had a long association with a lady who works out of Santa Barbara, California, and she's been really great in terms of helping her clients navigate the challenges. And definitely she's been in there longer than me, although I have been longer in the digital space, but she has sort of crossed the bridge from when computers were just coming through to where computers are the norm, and digital space has become something that that is considered second nature for organizations. So I'll send her name to you. You can check her out on LinkedIn and see if you can get an appointment with her, because she conducts like really nice retreat-oriented workshops and conferences, and she works on making businesses progress and become more profitable, and then sort of become good citizens, corporate citizens within the community they're serving. So hopefully she can engage with you, and then you can get some insights in that context too. So happy to send that contact.
Yeah, be great. And I want to keep that wide open, that if there's anything from my corporate background or experiences or whatever that may be.
Excellent.
I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I believe you have my email, but do you?
I don't know if I have it, but is it on your LinkedIn profile?
It is.
Okay, okay. So
Perfect.
I can either send it directly on the feed, that sort of links us as a, we are connected on LinkedIn, so I think it shouldn't be a
Sure.
problem in terms of just sending it right in that feed, or
Good point.
I can send it through the email, so that shouldn't be a problem. And definitely I'll be in touch with you if there's something that I need to
Please do.
engage in from your perspective also, because definitely this is a two-way street, and
Yeah.
that's how professionals work, and it's a synergistic collaboration all the way.
Well, you have yourself, well, you're about to go to bed soon, so you have yourself a good night.
Yeah.
And I
Thank you.
will hopefully talk to you not too far in the distant future.
Excellent. And I look forward to sending you the articles and the contact, and hopefully for more of your enjoyment.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.